This is Rahul, and here I want to show you another beautiful chess game that I played in recent times. In this game, I had the black pieces, and I had reached this position on move 42 when my opponent played the move rook b5. The reason I wanted to show this game was that it involves around two important chess principles that can help me find the best move after this position. So before going to the principles, let's evaluate the black's position here. The black has two pass pawns, one on the b file and the other one on the d file, which are very close to queening. Also, the white rook here is now attacking one of the pass pawns on the b file and also attacking the pawn on h file. And after the pawn on h file drops, white himself has two connected pass pawns, which he can eventually queen. But the white pawns are a little far from the queening square. So the most of the action here involves around the black's pass pawns, and the black actually has a really good position here, but black needs to find the precise moves to continue. So here, with very less time on the clock, my instant reaction after seeing this move was let's support the pawn uh, on b file, and I played the move rook c3 to support the pawn because that's the only way I could have defended that. But had I focused on the important principles, I would have found even a better move, which would have led to win. So after this move, rook c3, the game goes to a sequence of moves that leads to eventually to a draw. And I'll show you what happened after this move. My opponent played king e3, and here after this move, there's no way I can continue with any of these three pieces because if I move this pawn, the white king will eventually capture it. If I move my rook away to any square, let's say back to c4, then the white can pick up either this pawn or this pawn. And if I move the rook, if I move this pawn, white rook will simply capture it. So after this move king e3, I cannot move any of these three pieces, and what I was left was to move my king, and I wanted to bring my king to eventually support the h pawn so that I eventually do not lose the game. So after this, my opponent played king d2, and I had to move my rook away, and then his rook captured one of the pawns, then I captured his pawn, then he captured my pawn, and then we lead to a position which is eventually a draw. So all that happened when I played this move rook rook to d rook to c3. But I had an even better move here, which if I had like 15 minutes on my clock, I would have been able to calculate all variations. But with low time on clock, it was important for me to remember those two principles to have arrived to that move. So let's first talk about those two principles. So I'll show you another position here where the white has two connected pass pawns in the middle of the board, and the black king is attacking the chain of the pass pawns. Uh, so in this position, my question to you all is, can black king capture this pawn in this position? Are these pawns self-defended, or are they immune? Are they prone to be captured? The answer is black king cannot capture this pawn, because if the black king captures this pawn, then you get a sequence where white can eventually raise this pawn towards queening, and the white will win this game. So in this position, the black cannot capture this pawn because this pawn races away to the queening square, and the black king does not have enough time to stop the pawn from queening. So the pawns are self-defended in this position. So this is what is the principle of the race condition, where the king is does not have enough time to um, to block the pawn from queening. And coming back to this game, and there's another important principle that we use in chess, that if you want to promote a pawn towards the queen, bring your rook behind that pawn. So in this position, I have two passed pawns. The principle says that my rook should be behind uh, either of these passed pawns. So keeping in these two principles in mind, uh, can you guys now spot the best move for black in this position while I give you a couple of seconds? So the best move and the obvious move is rook to d4, because if you play rook to b4 supporting this pawn, then the white will eventually grab my rook, and if I move my pawn towards a queen square, white has enough time to stop them, and in this position white will eventually win. So the only obvious move was rook to d4, and now let's see what happens after this move if white captures this pawn. So after white captures this pawn, I can simply play pawn to d2, and if so, now the white does not have enough time to stop this pawn from queening, because if the white tries to stop this pawn from queening, I can still eventually make this pawn into a queen, and now you see why it is important for my rook to be behind the passed pawn, because now I can capture his rook, and this position is clearly winning for black, because next move I'll try to block his king from this uh, from coming into this line, and I'll bring my king towards his pawn on a file, capture it, and then capture his remaining pawns, and then uh, try to win this game with the rook. So this position is completely winning, and after this move, if he tries to bring his king towards the pawn, I can simply bring my queen, and again you see that my rook is defending the queening square, and now his king cannot capture my queen and has to move away. So you see how the two principles are how the principle of putting my rook behind the pawn is actually coming into play here. Now after this move, there's another move that could be played, is king to e3. Now here his king is attacking both my rook and the pawn, and if I try to save my rook by bringing the rook behind to the square d8, then he can simply bring his king uh, in front of the pawn and block the pawn from moving forward, and then he can simply capture this pawn with the rook, and then eventually this pawn, and then this game is completely winning, or at least a draw for white. So after this move, the move that you need to find is not rook to d8 but the move d2. And you see the principle we talked about, the race condition coming into play here. So if the king captures this rook, the king does not have enough time to stop my pawn from queening, and I get a queen in the position, and this is completely winning for black. And if in this position white plays the move king e2, then also I can bring my queen into the game, since my rook is supporting the queening square. So you see, in this position, if I had focused or remembered these two principles well, it was very easy for me to spot this move, rook d4. So this is what I wanted to cover in this game, that uh, if you are well versed with the principles, then you can make decisions faster, which is very much required, especially in a position where you reach an end game, where you'll most likely have very little time on your clock. and you need to make decisions very fast. And if you remember the principles well, you can make those decisions. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope to come up with more uh, videos covering different chess principles and different positions in future. Thank you.